Hello, I'm Katie Harrison and this is Stepmum Space, the judgment-free zone where we'll talk candidly about the fairy tales and scary tales of stepmum life. So whether you've been a stepmum for years, you're just starting out, or you want to understand the stepmum in your life a little bit better, this is the place for you. My guest today, Lauren, is a stepmum to a 14-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. Before we get into the conversation, I just want to let you know that there are discussions around domestic violence and baby loss in this episode. So if you'd rather listen to something else that's a little bit lighter, then please do so. Okay, let's get into the show. Tell us a bit about your family, Lauren.
So my family is myself and my husband, and we have two children. So my stepdaughter is 14 and a half, and my stepson is 11 and a half.
And what age were they when you met them?
So they were 8 and 11 when we first met. We've been together 3 years now, and we've been married just over a year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we decided to elope.
Oh, wow.
So we eloped to Scotland, and it was just the two of us and the two children. It was perfect. I actually really loved that we did it that way. And my stepdaughter walked me down the aisle, and my stepson was best man, and it was a perfect day. It was really great.
Oh, that's so lovely. They were such a big part of your day.
And they absolutely wanted to be as well. And I always think of it actually as it, like when we celebrated our wedding anniversary, that was our wedding anniversary, as in our family. And then my husband and I celebrate our first date anniversary as just the two of us. So I have these kind of two different anniversaries, but one is very much our family anniversary. And I love that idea.
That's really, really, really nice. Yeah. And it's interesting because you hear a lot of stories about stepfamily weddings being quite a source of conflict, but it sounds like yours was really the exact opposite.
It really was. That wedding felt like it was very much us as a family. It's special because at the beginning, I wouldn't necessarily have believed that that would be where we'd be at.
Really? So talk to us a little bit about the early days.
We met online, but actually we worked for the same organisation. It's quite a big organisation with several thousand people, so we just haven't crossed paths. And we had about 5 or 6 weeks at the beginning of amazing, just the two of us dates. And I knew from the very beginning that he had two children. So I was 39 when we met and had been single a very long time. And so actually I had been thinking that I liked the idea of meeting someone who had children because I really wanted a family. And because I was 39, I was thinking, well, you know, if I meet someone now, that's a possibility that might not happen for me. If they already have children, then that's lovely because hopefully I'd get that sense of family. So I knew that he already had children. We talked about them in the weeks before we met. We actually talked for about 4 or 5 weeks before we met up. It meant that I knew a lot about these two amazing small humans that he talked about. And so I just felt this was a really positive possible relationship in terms of that thing of me potentially having children in my life, which would be so exciting.
Yeah.
But obviously a lot of women, when they meet someone who has children, then it's likely that they only see them every other weekend, possibly. Whereas it was made clear that he had complete custody of his daughter, who was 11 at the time, and majority custody of his son, who was 8.
And were they children from the same relationship?
Yes, they share the same biological mother. So I already had this sense that maybe that this was an unusual circumstance that I was getting involved in. I didn't know the reasons for it, but I knew that there was obviously a reason why my husband had full custody of his daughter and that his son didn't see his mother very often. And obviously that was something I had to consider during that time that we were talking online, and then also during the early parts of our dating, because that meant that I wasn't going to just be a stepmom who saw the children every other weekend, but that actually this was potentially full-time parenting. But as I say, I knew that from the start, and on our first date, he opened up about the reasons behind that quite quickly, because I think he recognised that if this was going to go anywhere, I needed to know the complexity of what I was getting involved in. And he was very honest about that. It was a very odd first date. Actually, the second date was even weirder because he kind of gave the context a little bit without detail in the first date. So he explained that he'd been the victim of domestic violence. Therefore, he'd been on his own with the children since our daughter was 7 and a half and his son was 4 and a half. So he'd been on his own quite a while. There was a final assault where his ex-wife was taken away by the police, and he'd then been responsible for the children since then. So he sort of gave that as a brief background during the first date, and then the second date was when we went to this Turkish restaurant for this second date, and he started explaining more detail about it, which was obviously quite difficult for him to explain. And, you know, I'm listening intently, and then suddenly this kind of mariachi band started off in the background or something, singing happy birthday to someone.
Oh God,
it was the weirdest juxtaposition of him telling me this quite difficult thing that he had to tell me to explain with this band going off in the background. It was really odd.
Read the room, pick your moment.
Absolutely. But we talked about it so much since, and we've laughed about the fact that was the setup for our relationship, was this juxtaposition that we have between like quite difficult stuff that we have to go through together, but also humour and laughter and fun, and that kind of, that was set up in that second date.
And I guess it's great that he felt so able to be honest with you right off the bat. So you,
yeah,
I nearly said you knew what you were getting into. Of course you didn't know what you were getting into.
But he tried to give me as much of a clear indication from the start. Any woman coming into that circumstance, for them to have the right person for that, maybe.
Yeah.
That sounds rather arrogant to suggest that I was the right person. And obviously there have been times, countless times over the 3 years that we've been together, where I have gone, I'm just not the right person for this. So the children deserve someone better. My husband deserves someone better. But clearly that was what he was looking for. And he certainly feels, even if I'm not always confident of it, that he chose somebody who was the right person for that circumstance.
And I bet you are. I bet you're not giving yourself enough credit for everything you've done. So how were the children with you in the early days?
So as I said, we had about 5 or 6 weeks of lovely romantic dating, and then we had a discussion about me meeting the children, because we knew that this was something that was long term. And when we talked about it, my husband suggested that I meet his daughter first and then his son later. His explanation for that was the fact that he felt his daughter might actually struggle with it more than his son. So she was the older of the two. As I say, she was 11 at the time. And I took his word for that. You know, he knows his children best. Because his son was going away for contact weekends with his mother occasionally, we chose a weekend where his son was going to be away and I would meet his daughter. And I have this lovely memory of the doorbell going and me going to the front door of my house to meet them. We decided to meet at my house and then go for a walk. And the doorbell going and me opening the door to this little girl on the doorstep in this little hat that she had pulled down, and she looked up at me and I said hello, and she just said, "Could I use your toilet?" And I said, "Yes, of course you can."
Way to break the ice.
Yeah, off she went, and I was just stood there on the doorstep frantically thinking, oh gosh, was my bathroom tidy? But I hadn't expected her to need to use it.
And I'm pretty sure an 11-year-old's not going to be judging your bathroom hygiene.
Well, I really hope she wasn't.
So in what context had she been kind of introduced to you?
Well, interestingly enough, both the children had started to talk to their dad about the fact that they felt that maybe it was about time he got a girlfriend. They knew from the off, our daughter knew in particular, that I was not just Daddy's friend, and that actually we'd been spending some time together for a while. Her initial upset was over the fact that she hadn't known and he hadn't told her, because he'd been going on dates with me and saying that he was seeing somebody from work. And so actually her initial upset was the fact that she felt that he'd lied to her. You know, I remember that as being a really happy first meeting. Now looking back, now I know her as well as I know her, I can see that there were signs of anxiety around the relationship, but she genuinely seemed very positive towards me and we got on really well. She firmly held her dad's hand through all of that, but seemed also to be really receptive and open to talking to me. That conflict that I saw on that first meeting very much played out for sort of the first sort of 6, 8 months, maybe even longer than that actually, in terms of how she felt about me.
How did that stuff show up in day-to-day life?
So it was really clear that she loved the idea of having a woman in her life, because obviously her biological mother she had chosen not to see.
Did she know about the situation with her dad? Had she
been... so she witnessed quite a lot of the violence towards her dad.
Right.
And certainly that final evening she was present throughout. In fact, it was her who went next door to a neighbour to get help. So she was very aware of that, and that was why she made the choice that she did not want to see her biological mother and has never seen her since.
Okay.
As I said, it was clear that she really liked the idea of having a woman in her life, and she liked me as a person. The difficulty she had was accepting that I was in a relationship with her dad, and the worry that I was taking her place in terms of his affection and his love, as if his love was finite, that he only had so much for sort of 6-8 months, maybe more. She hated us holding hands. She would deliberately push between us and walk between us. She'd deliberately maneuver herself, so she was always in between us. She wouldn't let us sit together if we went for meals, the 4 of us or the 3 of us sometimes, if her brother was away. When I started meeting the rest of the family and we'd go for family meals with her grandparents, she wouldn't want us sat together. She'd make sure that she sat with her dad and I didn't. She didn't like to see affection between us. Even though I was staying over, she would deliberately try and stay up as late as she could. She didn't like us going back downstairs after she'd been put to bed. So as I said, I could see the conflict in her, that she loved the idea of having a maternal figure in her life. She really liked me, but there was still this issue around me and her dad.
And how did that make you feel during that time?
Oh, hurt sometimes. Hurt in relation to my husband, because I tried to get across to him that I found that really hard, because obviously, yes, I had chosen to be in a relationship with a man who had children, but I chose to be in a relationship with him, and I wanted a relationship with him as well. Sometimes that meant that actually, we ended up as a couple taking a back seat to my relationship with children, his relationship with the children, and our relationship as this kind of fledgling, what became a family. And if there was this constant insistence that we couldn't spend any time alone, going on dates at that point became completely impossible. And we'd try and meet for lunch at work, so at least we had some time alone. And that side of it I found really, really hard.
And did he understand those feelings?
Yes, I think he does accept and acknowledge those feelings, and he was very empathetic to them. I think what he struggled with was what to do about it. He kept saying, I think it will just take time. I think it will just take time. And it did. It's not like that now. But obviously it took much more time than I was expecting.
And that's hard in those moments. It's really difficult to find the balance between obviously respecting what's difficult for your stepdaughter and wanting to go a bit slower on the journey to make it comfortable for her, but also grown-ups who are a couple sitting next to each other for a family meal is okay. Yeah. For some reason, I think in step families, you just feel way more conscious of saying, no, we're going to sit here. You can sit over there, or well, you can sit the other side of me. Or I remember literally so many conversations about who would sit where. And just in the end, just being like, I don't want to spend the next 10 years arguing about where everyone sits for their dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time I did think, is this going to be like this until they leave home? It just doesn't ever being able to sit together or hold hands or go out on, to the movies or to dinner. And I also think I was so conscious of the fact that she in particular, of the 2 children, had obviously had a much harder time. And the relationship that she had with her dad was forged in this fire of them both healing from what they'd been through. And also because our daughter had to deal with her brother going away, and that must have been incredibly difficult. I mean, she still talks about, even now, even though she's used to it and it happens regularly and she knows that he's happy going, and she says it's like having a limb just removed for a weekend. So her relationship with her dad was so tight, so forged, so close. I would have to have been understanding anyway, but under those circumstances I think I had to probably be more understanding, because it was just such a complex situation.
And I noticed when you were talking earlier, you talked about our daughter and his son.
The complexity of labels around is so hard, because, she is my daughter. She doesn't have a relationship with her biological mother. And although they both call me Lauren, that's not how she feels. And certainly she has spoken about the fact that with her friends and to other people, she refers to me as her mum. She doesn't do that within the house because she worries about the impact that will have on her brother. He is very uncomfortable around the label mum in relation to me, and anything around mothering or mums causes him a lot of distress. There's obviously a lot of conflict because I mother him, if we're looking at it as a kind of adjective, the vast majority of the time, and do all of the school run and the packed lunches and the getting him ready in the morning, and I do all of his homework with him and the washing and making sure he's got everything he needs, and
the list goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, the list goes on. And so I do all of the mothering, and I mummy him. I'm the one who cuddles him into bed at night and reads him story and those kinds of things. But he has a mum who he has that label for. more. She just doesn't see him as much and doesn't do so much of that mumming. So that makes it incredibly difficult for him. And then their relationship is then incredibly difficult between the two children because they're in these totally different, distinctive places in terms of what goes on around them in terms of mothering. And that causes sometimes quite difficult conflict between the two of them, which is heartbreaking for me because I don't want to be the cause of that.
And do you see that conflict play out?
Yes, yeah, and it's really hard. My most recent birthday, the children would buy me a card. They normally would buy me a card together, and they have always in the past. That when they went to the shop to buy one together, she picks up one which said "Happy Birthday, Mum" on it. He was incredibly uncomfortable with that and said, "Oh, well, let's go and look at these ones over here," and was looking at other different cards in the not mum section. And she said, "Well, why not this one?" And he wouldn't express as to why. He wouldn't say it in words, but he just said, "Oh, no, I think these ones over here are better. I think these are funnier and these are better." She said to him, "But you bought one for Lauren with mum on before. Why are you having a problem with it now?" And he wouldn't articulate, but it ended up with my husband having to separate them because they were getting really quite sort of agitated with one another and saying, let's just leave it. Because she couldn't understand his distress over it. He increasingly has found it really difficult to deal with these two mums that he feels that he has. One that is the official mum with the label and one that is the woman that does the mumming. and that must be so, so hard for him. And I'm very empathetic to that. But also, sometimes I find it hurtful, if I'm honest. And that's hard to admit, I think. The label belongs to somebody else. And I'm understanding of that. And I wouldn't want to get in the way of that. It's hurtful sometimes, I think.
Yeah. And what's his relationship like with his biological mother?
It seems to be very warm. He seems very happy to go and spend time with her. I know that he loves her and I know he loves me. So I can't imagine what that must be like.
Yeah. And I guess for him, whether he's feeling it because of things his mum's saying or doing, or whether he's just feeling it because he feels torn about these feelings. And also he's got this sister who's in quite a different situation.
My feelings are very different in relation to both of them, and that's only something that probably I've started to deal with in the last couple of months, really. I love them both, and I know that is not always a given in step-parent and stepchild relationships, but there is a freedom and an easiness to the relationship and the love that I have for our daughter that is more difficult in my relationship with our son.
Yeah,
my stepson.
Yeah. That's understandable, given everything that you've explained.
But what's difficult, obviously, for the children is they're both in the same house. And I often pick up on tensions between jealousy between them in relation to their relationship with me.
And so do you think your stepson or son, I'm conscious, which language do you prefer?
I call him my boy when I'm talking about him. I tend not to say my son. It's so loaded, and I think that would make his biological mother incredibly uncomfortable. I think she'd be very uncomfortable about me calling our daughter my daughter, but that one's different.
That's quite a nice way of doing it, though, to say my boy, because
he feels like my boy, and I call him my boy. How's my boy today? It's with absolute affection and love that I call him that. It's something that I've settled on as being the most comfortable that I can get, that sort of has that warmth to it, but without taking away from the relationship that he has with his biological mother, and without making him feel uncomfortable as well.
And how do you think things will change over the coming years as your boy grows into adulthood?
I mean, that is a question that I ask myself every day because I think the contact that he has at the moment with his mother, she lives quite a way away, not near a lot of his friends and not near his school. And I've noticed it obviously happened with our daughter very naturally, that she now wants to spend more time with her friends than she does with me and her dad, and he's going to find that difficult if he's going every other weekend. When I'm thinking about them, I think this is quite tied up with the love that I feel for them as well, and the difference in the love that I feel for them. So with our daughter, I can picture her in the future long term. I can picture me being devastated when she goes off to university. I can picture me being at her graduation, probably embarrassing her in a silly hat. I can picture her on the day of her wedding. I can picture that future for her.
When you were saying that, Lauren, I was getting goosebumps, like just the way you talk about her. For a girl who's clearly been through an awful lot, it's so amazing that she's got you.
Oh, thank you. I hope she feels that. I mean, I feel so lucky to have her. It's much harder to picture that future in relation to him because I know there will always be the situation of his biological mother, and that she will be involved in all of those things, and rightly so. She's his mum, but obviously there's a complexity around that, about the fact that due to the nature of the relationship and the breakdown of the relationship between my husband and his ex-wife, they aren't in the same room together. They can't be in the same room together, and therefore those images of those things in the future are more complex in relation to him. And I'm really aware that my boy might have to make some really difficult choices in the future about who's at what and who he invites. And we've already seen some of that start to play out already. School shows, for example, when they only give 2 tickets, it goes to biological mum and biological dad. I don't get a ticket. That's hard. I can't imagine how difficult he finds that. And he must have lots of questions. Although, as I say, he does not necessarily talk about his emotions and his feelings very much, that doesn't mean that he doesn't feel. I could sense that he has a lot of emotion inside him. He just doesn't necessarily express it. And so I know that he must find all of that difficult, and I know he must have lots of questions. I think he just worries about asking them. I think he's worried about opening that Pandora's box. If he asked directly, that he wouldn't want to know the answers yet. He has asked questions about why his sister doesn't go.
And do you know what she said?
Well, I mean, this is why I think she's incredible. So she could have told him lots over the years, but she has chosen not to. When I've talked to her about it, she said that she doesn't want to spoil his relationship with his mum.
What an incredible young woman.
She really is. I'm so proud of her, and just so full of admiration for how brave and smart and caring and funny she is. I mean, I'm painting this amazing picture of her being absolutely perfect, and obviously that's glossing over the screaming at her that she's not ready, and the shouting matches we have had at various different points. And I think they're no more different than would be normal.
It's interesting when you talk about the screaming and the shouting matches and you laugh, because for me, that is an entirely normal interaction, I think, between anyone and their teenage daughter. But I think if you felt like she was just your stepdaughter, you would probably not laugh about it, and you would probably feel guilty about it. So I think it's kind of testament to your relationship in a way that you're able to do that.
I think it probably is, and I've slowly grown to realise that. Whereas when me and my boy have had screaming matches, that is very different.
In how you feel or how he feels?
Both of us, I think. I think there's an enormous elephant in the room. No matter what the argument's been over, it will frequently end in him either screaming, I don't care, or you don't care. And often I have to almost break it and very explicitly talk to him about how much I love him. And how special he is to me.
It's that unconditional thing, isn't it? It's that you're always, as a step parent, you don't have that same, and I don't think it's DNA, because it's not necessarily a biological thing, but you don't have that same base of whatever happens, I'm always going to love you. Yeah. Even when you're your worst self, I'm going to love you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that shows through my relationship with our daughter, the fact that it's not DNA, because we are not biologically related, and that there isn't that I haven't got the biological instinct to feel like that towards her. That's grown through something else, that I love her and she loves me, and that will never change. It's completely rock solid. Whereas there is a way in which both myself and my boy have a fear and an uncertainty around our relationship, and a hesitancy about whether we really do love each other, and whether that's okay, and whether that and guilt. I think both of us feel guilt. I think that's interesting. I think mine is different from his. So obviously he feels a loyalty to his biological mother, and I feel a guilt about the fact that my love for him is different from my love for his sister. And I always feel guilty about that. And it took me a while to accept that. Interestingly, it was a conversation that went on one of the now date nights me and my husband are allowed to have, where we had a long talk about it, and I admitted it for the first time. I said, it's not that I don't love them both. I do. I love them both. But I love them both very differently. And I feel guilt around the fact that I love them differently. And he said, I don't think that's just step parenting. And he said, I think that parents often love their children differently, but just wouldn't be open to admit it. And he said, and I think the fact that you're brave enough to actually admit it is something that a lot of biological parents might actually find difficult.
It's great that he can understand all of that, and that you guys are continually having these conversations and continually talking about what's going on in your family. I think that's something that definitely we can all learn from. And how is your husband's relationship with the children? Obviously yours is very distinct, close to them both, but distinct.
Yeah.
Does he have the same relationship with both his kids?
He still has this incredible bond with our daughter, and I am in absolute awe of how he fathered a daughter on his own. They can talk to each other about anything. I've just started to notice at the age that she's at that there are a couple of things that she's more likely to talk to me about, and she'll say, don't tell dad. I initially felt a little bit uncomfortable about it, and then when I talked to him about it, he said, no, I think that's fine, and if you were her biological mother, that would be normal too, so let's just go with it. His relationship with his son, I think, also is complex. I think he obviously has that incredibly deep-rooted love. There is a similarity between them in some ways that I've noticed more and more as his son's got older, that actually he's more similar to his dad than maybe I realised. I recognise that there are ways in which, and I think our daughter recognises this too, he gives our boy a lot more free passes on behaviours and tends to probably wrap him in cotton wool a little bit more than our daughter at the same age. I think my husband does that because he feels a sense of guilt and a sense of having to overcompensate for a situation where he goes away. I think it frustrates his sister. I think sometimes it frustrates me because I recognise that he treats him slightly differently and feel for our daughter.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of not fair. but also at the same time 100% understand why.
So it sounds like you've been on quite the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're in a really good place now, but obviously there are still unknowns and there are still things that may pan out over the coming years. What are your hopes and fears for the future?
Well, my husband and I decided that we would quite like to have a child of our own. As I mentioned, my concern about when I met him at 39 was that I would be a bit old, and obviously that's still a fear, but we did make the decision we wanted to try. We just didn't do that for a while because our daughter in particular was absolutely adamant that we were not to have a child when we first met, and for about the first year or so that we were together.
Do you know why she was adamant about that?
I think it was connected to this idea of her feeling like love was finite and that there's only so much. And I actually think the shift in her deciding that actually it would be okay if we had a child of our own was around the time that she probably started shifting in terms of realising that me and her dad, he could love me and her and it wouldn't diminish. But when she had said from the beginning, I don't want you to have a child, she even put a sex ban in the house where she said we weren't allowed to have sex if she was in the house. Obviously, she's in the house every night. So we were like, her brother had also said the same. And then once she started to sort of change her mind and there was little signs, if we met up with friends who had babies or small children, she sort of said, oh, you know, if you and dad had a child, wonder what it would look like. And there were little signs that maybe something was shifting. And then eventually she just said, yes, she would quite like the idea of a baby brother or sister. And as soon as she changed her mind, our son did too. In fact, he has wholeheartedly got behind it to the point of the fact that I remember one night him jumping up and down on our bed at bedtime in his pajamas going, have a baby, have a baby, have a baby. And we were going, okay.
Leave the room, leave the room, leave the room.
We'll try and get onto that. So we have been trying. I'm 42, so it's a difficult path. We've been waiting for a while, and then I did get pregnant. Unfortunately, I've lost the baby.
I'm sorry to
hear that. I
had
a miscarriage. At the scan, we found that the baby had not developed.
That's heartbreaking.
It has been, but I am full of hope because I've been through enormous amounts of hurdles in this marriage and this family. And this is another hurdle. So that's certainly the plan. And then I can imagine there'll be a whole other podcast, Katie, about how I negotiate a child in the house who does call me mum with 2 children who don't, and how that pans out. But we'll deal with that when we get to it, I guess.
Well, I'm just in complete awe of you, Lauren. just what you've been through and the children and your husband and the place that you've got to, I'm just in awe by how amazing you are. So, congratulations. It's not an easy thing to do, and I really, really hope that things do work out in the way you want with a future pregnancy. Wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you very much.
Wow, what a story. I'm really grateful to Lauren for being so open about her situation and for sharing so generously some of her feelings which others may have chosen to keep hidden. It takes a brave woman to do that, so thank you. As always, if you've got a story you'd like to share, please do get in touch. You can find me at www.stepmumspace.com or on Instagram at stepmumspace. And finally, thanks for listening, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please do spread the word, give us a rating or review so other women can find us, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.